mergers and takeovers. Okay, we're going to take a look at one of the most common areas of business that you see in the news all of the time, and that will be the areas of growth and acquisitions that take place in businesses. Because businesses operate in a competitive environment which is constantly changing, businesses are always looking for opportunities to grow. They tend to grow either organically or via acquisitions. Some of the terms that you'll see in business are probably mergers and takeovers, but you probably are asking the question, what's the difference between the two? A takeover typically happens when a larger organisation will look to purchase a smaller organisation, and this is what we call a takeover. However, if the organisations are of a similar size and they have a common interest, then they may look to try and merge. A takeover is typically called an acquisition because one company tends to be trying to buy another. When one business tends to acquire a controlling interest in the other organisation, that will then become the legal owner of the business. This is much more common than mergers, and typically you will see this happening all the time in the news. An example takeover that you may have seen in the news was when Sky Broadband purchased O2 Broadband for £200 million in March 2013. This acquisition took place because O2 wanted to raise some capital so it could focus on the mobile phone market and bid in the 4G auctions that came up, whereas Sky was looking to increase its mobile broadband share, and as a result of this it got more customers that it could potentially target with new products such as TV, telephone and any other services Sky want to move into. Now sometimes not all takeovers are wanted. If this happens, it's what's called a hostile takeover. Because when a company is a PLC, it's forced to sell its shares on the stock market, this means that anybody can purchase shares in the company. As a result, this means a large organisation can potentially spend lots of money buying up shares of a smaller business. As a result of this increased demand for the shares, the price of the shares will rise. Now some shareholders will hold on because they want to keep control of the company. However, many shareholders are there to make a profit. So as a result, they will sell their shares when the price is right. As a result, once more than 50% of the shares have been sold in the business, the organisation is then under the control of a potential new buyer. As a result, this is now a takeover. It may be hostile there because it's not wanted. A good example of this is in the news at the moment. Currently, Pfizer are making an attempt to try and buy AstraZeneca. Now this is a hostile takeover because the management of AstraZeneca have refused 3 bids already from Pfizer. However, Pfizer now is going to go to the stock market and try and buy up shares. So this is something that AstraZeneca management cannot stop happening. So as a result, in the end, Pfizer may get control of AstraZeneca. The UK government is not too keen for this to happen because it limits the amount of competition in the market. Okay, a merger typically takes place when organisations are of a similar size or a similar scale. Typically, the organisations will operate normally in the same market. Now, they will normally form a new organisation because it can achieve better economies of scale and it can reduce the unit costs. This will then increase the profitability of the organisation. Normally, the organisation that's been created as a form of a merger is made up of directors and shareholders from each of the founding companies, and they will make up this new organisation. A classic good example of a merger is the T-Mobile-Orange merger, which came together to bring about EE. T-Mobile, which was owned by Deutsche Telekom, and Orange, which is owned by French Telecom, came together to form this new business called EE. What happened was it became the market leader with a 37% share of the market. This potentially caused a problem initially because the Competition Commission had to rule on whether it was going to allow this to happen. As you can see, it gives them a potential monopoly, and a very clear monopoly in the market. However, it was argued that it was in the interest of the consumers to see one large player in the marketplace who could deliver about the 4G changes that were required. The merger was claimed to result in synergy savings of $3.5 billion in the long term. However, in the short term, the cost of bringing it all together was estimated to be around the £1 billion mark. You need to take out the following considerations when thinking about doing a merger or takeover. Will it be allowed due to competition regulation? Remember, if you're going to acquire a business which has a monopoly, this is probably going to be refused. Will the cost synergies that you actually think you're going to achieve ever materialise? Will merging two companies create gaps and new entrants to the market? And then will you end up with new competitors filling up the space what you were meant to try to eradicate by bringing yourself together? And will you actually achieve the economies of scale that you expect? When a merger or takeover takes place, we can assess each of these different types by the type of integration that it uses. It may use horizontal integration, it could use backwards vertical integration, or it could use forwards vertical integration. Horizontal integration is when an organisation is in the same industry and the same stage of production merge or take over each other. These mergers tend to enable increased economies of scale, and using the model of Porter's 5 forces, it will increase your bargaining power over your suppliers, and it will reduce the power that the customers have to bargain with you, thus reducing the price. A good example of horizontal integration is the merger of T-Mobile and Orange to form EE. T-Mobile and Orange were both in the secondary sector and in the tertiary sector, and they both have mobile phone masts, which belong to landowners. Now, thinking logically about this, currently both would have land masts placed on land in separate locations, maybe near to each other, and they'll be paying rent on this. Bringing it together means that they can actually share masts. As a result of this, they only pay out one lot of rent. This gives them more bargaining power to the landowners because they can go for the one who charges them the lowest amount of rent. One is going to lose out, so they're in competition with each other. At the same time, it also means customers have got reduced bargaining power because they've got less companies to visit for the mobile phone choice and less companies to haggle with. A perfect example of horizontal integration. Backwards vertical integration is when an organisation merge or take over an organisation in a different stage of production than the one that they're in, and it's always below their current operation. So, for example, this would be when a secondary takes over a primary, or when a tertiary takes over a secondary. Typically, these sort of mergers enable reduced unit costs and they reduce the bargaining power of the supplier. A good example of this is when Morrison's, who are in the tertiary sector, bought Rathbones Bakery, who are in the secondary sector. Morrison's purchased Rathbone Bakeries in 2005 for £15.5 million. This was perfect for Morrison's because it enabled them to have more control over their supplier. They could control the unit cost they actually paid. But more importantly, Rathbone supplied other supermarkets. This gave Morrison's access to vital information about contracts and agreements that were in place with their competition. Forwards vertical integration is less common. This is one where mergers and takeovers take place between businesses again in a different stage of production to their own, but it's always in front of their current one. For example, this would be when the primary takes over the secondary, or when the secondary takes over the tertiary. These mergers tend to enable reduced units cost again, and it also increases the bargaining power between supplier and customer. It's hard to find examples of that, hence why I'd advise you go away and read. I must be honest that I find it difficult to find examples when I've been reading around. Sometimes businesses look to retrench. Retrenchment is when you actually look to shrink in size. Typically, this strategy is used as a survival strategy, and it always happens or tends to happen when a business is facing tough economic times. A business tends to focus on its core, so then it will close down or sell off other areas of business which it doesn't value as being important or may not be profitable. Finally, an area of growth could be organic growth. This growth is natural growth. This is not where you're looking to buy another business. This is where you want to grow yourself in size naturally. You may look at diversification. You may look to just become larger in the market you operate now. This strategy can be expensive. However, it does allow you to attain a monopoly, because the government isn't going to intervene in monopolies because you're not purchasing another supplier or another company. As a result of this, you get companies like Tesco with 37% share of the supermarket industry. That was all achieved by organic growth. Okay, that's it. You should now be able to identify and assess the advantages and considerations that are brought about by takeovers and mergers on a business. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and my YouTube channel, and you can also tweet me any areas of business which you want me to cover in the future. Also, check out my brand new website, bbusinessb.co.uk.